Good evening. Welcome to Rose City Politics. It is September the 1st. Don't buy it though. Summer's not over. We still have summer for another 3 weeks left. So don't buy into the false narrative that it's over with. If you subscribe to that, that's your own personal belief, but you're wrong because it's still summertime. And that is just a fact. Our regular panel tonight includes myself, John Lidke. We also have Doug Sartori here. Doug, how are you doing? Where are you coming from?
I am coming to you from the climactic scene of the 1979 classic Rock and Roll High School. They should have just stopped making teen movies after they made Rock and Roll High School. It is so bizarre. And it ends with the school burning down, which really, once you've done that, it's like trying to jump Snake River Canyon twice, right? Once you've done that, there's just no more places to go.
Yeah, when the school is gone, there's nothing left.
I like how John's trying to participate, but he has no idea what these references are.
He's like whatsoever. Snake River Canyon. I don't get it.
No,
you don't, do you?
Not at all.
Okay. All right. You know what? Just Google it. Listeners under 40, you go ahead and Google that and find out what it's all about.
Yeah. A sweet cape.
and a cane full of Jim Beam.
And methamphetamines.
Yeah.
The inside jokes keep going.
The old people jokes.
I'll take a look once we're on a break and see what it's all about. But before that, if you're a Patreon subscriber, thank you so much. If not, head to patreon.com/Rose City Politics. We are in print monthly. In BizX Magazine, our new issue just dropped today. We are talking about Windsor's population boom and what should be done to accommodate it. And it was all of us who actually wrote for this issue as well. So take a look at that. And of course, we're on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. So like, share, and subscribe. And Rose City Politics has been broadcasting live on tape thanks to the kind support of LiUNA 625, building better communities.
Should we give a big shout out to our great listeners in El Salvador? I hear we're very popular down there.
We should.
Yeah, this week we discovered through our charts that we are number 7 political podcast in El Salvador on the iTunes charts. So
hola, muchachos.
Yeah. I have no idea of any current political issues in El Salvador. I assume things must be going so swimmingly that they're like, what are those guys in Windsor doing? Let's check that out.
They're so bored in El Salvador.
Right.
They thought, let's check out what's going on in Windsor. We love those guys.
Things don't look like they're going that great down in El Salvador right now. Quick Google search is showing that they're inching back towards an authoritarian state. So, keep fighting the good fight, friends.
Our Sandinista brothers down there, we're with you.
So maybe we're the only political podcast that is making it through the firewall.
They just haven't killed us yet. They've killed everybody else down there.
Now we're going to have to be keeping our eyes behind us as well as we walk through the streets here in Windsor.
I'm picturing anti-Dilkins murals like painted on the walls now.
right next to Che Guevara with the hat and everything.
Rose City Politics, the voices of liberty for El Salvador.
Arcia Mundo.
Yeah, so shout out to all of you listening. Keep fighting the good fight, of course. We have we're taking the politics, unfortunately, hyper local tonight. So for you El Salvadorians, this is it's not going to be straight up your alley unless you're wanting to know the local educational politics of COVID-19 and school reopening recommendations. We're going to be talking about the Catholic board, about the public board, about motions for COVID vaccine mandates, about extracurriculars. We're going to go sort of across the board with where they're at. And we will be talking tonight about a very practical vaccination plan. It's almost a tunnel bus vaccination plan, but it's not in the tunnel and it won't be the tunnel bus, but it is a bus and it's bringing vaccines to high priority neighborhoods. Very practical, very good policy. I think we would all agree on that. So we'll be getting right into it. I'd say hit another theme song, but we don't do one of those like bumper things. We should, Doug.
You're right. Raise those production values, John.
Yeah, well, I'll just keep shouting it out. We'll see if anyone remembers next week. But right now, let's jump into this story. The Windsor Essex County Health Unit and the school reopening recommendations. They have come out strongly recommending to all local school boards and private schools to delay all extracurricular activities. This includes sports, clubs, field trips, and other non-essential activities within all school settings, both elementary and secondary schools. They want delayed until at least October of 2021. That's this year, a full month. They're looking to, I guess, take a look at how things roll out over this reopening plan. We'll hear some quotes specifically about this as well moving through. They also say no in-person assemblies or staff meetings. They just want virtual gatherings only. They're recommending indoor mask wearing for all students attending in-person learning from JK through 12 at all time. Now, this is new as well. I know that JK and SK were specifically mentioned in the reopening plans as standing out from the others. They also recommend physical activity classes should take place outdoors with as much additional restrictions as possible put on them. And they're recommending to limit the amount of non-cohort contact that individuals have throughout the school day. Before we get on to the different boards' policies to this, I saw a really cool thing on Twitter. I don't know how cool it was. I mean, it was talking about from the Spanish flu epidemic of 1918. And it was from the City of Toronto archives, and they were forest schools, and it was outdoor schools for students. And they just had full classrooms that were set up in outdoor wood settings. I mean, I could imagine that, some unions would have a lot of opposition to just setting up classrooms in the forest. I mean, how are they going to get cleaned? Who's going to rake the floor? That's a Trump cut right there.
Yeah. Did they know about Lyme disease back during the Spanish flu epidemic?
Yeah, listen, you got to pick and choose your battles, Doug.
You can't coddle the children, Doug. If you have a kid's going to get Lyme disease, you got to cut them away.
Now, one of the photos I saw, though, it wasn't just desks. They did have cots. So I was trying to figure out were they living in these classes as well.
Huh. Interesting.
It's like a bad Lord of the Rings episode.
So just while we're talking about the health unit stuff, I'm sorry to drag this podcast episode away from banter and to substance, but one thing that
sucks.
Sorry, guys. One thing that's interesting in the WeChew recommendations is something that's changed, and that is the mask recommendation. So you folks may remember, and it was highly contentious, at least at the public school board. I'm not sure about the Catholic, but it was highly contentious at the public school board because WeChew's recommendation was only for some children to be wearing masks. I don't remember the exact breakpoint, but kids in junior grades were not expected to wear masks, and it was not recommended. And there was a bit of a showdown at the school board between a set of trustees who were hardline and wanted every single child to be wearing a mask, and folks who were more willing to follow health unit recommendations. So I hope that if a WeChew representative is attending the school board meeting, that might be a topic to discuss, because what I'm curious about is if this is an evolution of the science, if in the time since last fall, has it become more understood perhaps how much of a benefit masks can be, or is this because of the higher level of virulence of the Delta variant? I'd be really interested to know the rationale or some other reason why the health unit has changed that recommendation.
Yeah, I mean, you got to presume it's probably, again, just making assumptions here, but probably due to Delta itself being, as you said, stronger virulence. But I think also just a desire not to, I'd imagine, see things, continually overwhelmed or shut down again, right? There's only so much that these people are able to do. And now with businesses reopening and enforcement coming on that side, and we just heard today with the vaccine passport, it's going to be bylaw that's going to be enforcing vaccine passport usage at businesses as well. So, I mean, the health unit they're tasked. They're doing so much work during this. It's wild. But let's dive into the schools here, if that's cool with both of you. And we're going to start talking first about the Catholic board, primarily because the public board is having a trustee meeting right now as we speak. So we're not able to know what's occurring until it occurs. But while we vamp a little bit here, we'll talk about the Catholic School Board. Now, board trustees supported a motion calling for COVID-19 vaccines for students, staff, and adding the COVID vaccine to the Immunization of School Pupils Act. They also recommended that COVID-19 shots be mandatory for all school employees, volunteers, and agencies, with the exception of those unable to do so for medical reasons. At a meeting yesterday, extracurriculars were delayed until October 21st. The director of education, Imelda Burney, said all extracurricular activities, including sports, clubs, field trips, and other non-essential activities within the school setting, were delayed. They're following the recommendations of the health unit here. I was surprised to see that so quickly right off the bat there, but I mean, I guess, school is starting, so you need to have these things in place. This was the quote that stuck out for me from the director of education for the Catholic School Board. Right now, we're just trying to make sure we start schools with protective measures layered for September 7th. Makes a lot of sense. They don't even know it. Like, no one knows what they're going to be dealing with right now. We're talking about opening up schools for the first time, in a while, since a lot's changed. The Delta variant has taken hold in Ontario, in a lot of municipalities. Windsor is consistently number 3 in the province, and not in a good way in terms of our infection rates. So Doug, what's your take on, we're seeing policies changing dramatically and rapidly here. You just brought that up. What's your take on the Catholic board?
So I think institutions have a responsibility to protect the people who they serve. And if there is increasing risk to children and increasing community risk because children are more susceptible to the Delta variant, then I think it makes sense for schools to be taking a bit of a harder line. I know that there was a delegate speaking tonight at the public board meeting about the extracurriculars. You folks have probably seen the media reports about extracurriculars and particularly football. With football not happening, people are pretty irate about it. Honestly, I get that it's one more inconvenience and more than an inconvenience, because for some kids, sports is their life. Sports is the way that they learn to be an adult, and the way that they relate to the world, and the thing that gets them up in the morning. So it's got to be real hard for some families. At the same time, extracurricular activities, beyond sports, even they are not essential. And I think it's entirely reasonable to delay all that until October, until we get a handle on what the impact of reopening schools will be in general. And hopefully everything goes swimmingly, and it's possible to start relaxing some of those restrictions. But I think it's really wise to be erring on the side of caution. So it's interesting too. So the Catholic board is mandating or recommending COVID-19 shots. So they're not mandating, they're recommending COVID-19 shots for employees. This is an interesting dance to watch as organizations decide where they can fall on this. I think there's a couple of things, not just the potential of legal challenges and disruption to the workplace, but because forcing people to do something can cause those challenges. But beyond that, it's just the logistics of tracking vaccinations without a passport, like without some central way of tracking vaccinations. The logistics of that can be challenging. We had a little bit of fun talking about the mayor's comments in that regard when we were talking about mandatory vaccination at the city. But I suppose that the school boards would be in a similar situation where they should have the organizational heft to be able to track and enforce a vaccination policy, but not every organization will. And not having, not having a standard provincial document that kind of lays out this is, this is the vaccination status of this individual might make it more difficult to implement.
Well, I was just gonna more ask a question than anything else. Most employers and employment opportunities have a whole bunch of conditions that you have to abide by. Doesn't it just make sense that it work in the public sector in a teaching situation where you're like, mandatory vaccination should be mandatory?
Yeah, I think it's squishy though, Don, because it's about people's personal health and their bodily autonomy. I think that's the reason why it's difficult. This is something that a lot of people have really strong feelings about. And look, I'm not an anti-vaxxer, and I'm not very much in sympathy with folks who are choosing not to be vaccinated. At the same time, look at the protests that have been happening around the province and around the country. Look at the level of anger that has been generated. And I know that it's easy to dismiss. And for all of us who have sacrificed so much over the past 18 plus months, some much more than others, trying to get through this pandemic, seeing people refuse to be vaccinated is a flashpoint for, I think, anger on the other side. But at the same time, it's pretty rare, I think, that you are going to impose a new condition on longtime employees that is going to potentially pose these kind of challenges. We don't drug test in Canada, Don. It's a very limited set of employers who can drug test employees. There is I think, a lot of respect in Canadian society and also in our legal system for people's personal choices and protecting people's privacy unless there is a demonstrable need. And I think that's what makes it difficult and I think it's hard to be totally heavy-handed. It's one thing to sit here and for us to say vaccination should be mandatory for everybody. But at the same time, imagine, Don, being the person who works in a 4-person restaurant, and you're the boss of a 4-person restaurant, and one of your staff who's worked for you for decades is adamant in refusing to be vaccinated. That's a difficult, challenging thing to deal with.
I agree with that. So I'm just pre-COVID, if that ever existed, and I don't remember which school it was. I don't know if it was Walkerville High School or if it was my son's public school, but I had to take him down to Old Road at the Windsor Health Unit there, and he had to get, I don't know if he was lacking a vaccination of some sort, but he had to have his vaccination records just to attend school. Now, this was pre-COVID, but it was mandatory for the students to have X, Y, and Z vaccinations. If they didn't have them, they had to go get them. And he was older, so I think it was probably around grade 7 to grade 9. I just forget which school it was. Or the threat was, well, you can't attend. It's not a threat. I mean, the policy was you can't attend. So I don't know why, just because this is a new disease and a new vaccination, that the same rules aren't implemented. He had to have those vaccinations to attend school. This is a vaccination. I don't think the government has made it mandatory yet, which, that's kind of the gray area. But yeah. I don't see, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, but it's a lot easier. And I think you're seeing lots of organizations are imposing mandatory vaccinations on the people they serve, because that's a lot easier. You can opt out. Even education, you can opt out of education. You can do remote learning, or you can homeschool. Restaurants can have or once the passports come into place, they can have a mandatory vaccination policy for the people that they serve. But for employees, it's a different story and a different situation, right? So I don't think that there has ever been mandated vaccines for teachers. There's mandated vaccinations for students, but I don't think that's ever been true for teachers.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I think it should be, but no one's made me king of Windsor yet. So, and just So anyone who's listened to the show or listen to me talk knows I have a brother who lives in Georgia. So Georgia opened up the schools a month earlier. They down south, they opened them a month earlier than we do here. So they've been back to school for almost a month now. Within 2 weeks of opening up schools, they've been shutting them down like crazy because of the exploding COVID problem running through the students at schools. First, I think in 5 days, they had 4,000 cases and a couple schools had to close down. And just looking online here, it's now like 21,000 cases. Do you think if we're not going to impose vaccinations, and obviously they don't do that in the States, aren't we just going to see the same thing here? And as a parent or grandparent, I mean, I know our kids are a little older now, but I got 2 grandkids who are going into grade 1, I believe, and they can't be vaccinated because they're 6 years old. Do you even want to send your kids back to school?
Yeah, so I think these are fair points to make. Baseline population vaccination in Canada is pretty good, certainly better than in the US, but there's no question that it's a risk reopening schools. I think the counterbalancing argument is that you're doing damage to kids keeping them out of school for this long. It's been very difficult for children. It's been, there's developmental obstacles that are being put in front of kids, and parents need the schools to be open, kids need the schools to be open, but is a reasonable price mandatory vaccination? I guess that's the question, right? I certainly want to see every Canadian who is able to be vaccinated to get vaccinated, and I think that where we can, we should be mandating vaccinations. I don't see why you couldn't mandate vaccinations for students, especially because there's a remote learning option available. It's a little bit different for staff, but it's interesting to see that the Catholic board is all in on this and not making a differentiation between students and staff. It'll be interesting to see if the public board goes the same direction.
Yeah, I would hope so. But yeah, you're right. Given the religious aspect of the Catholic board, that's not involved in the public board. It is interesting. They're going a little more hardline than the public board is. And one of the arguments you'll hear from the anti-vaccine people is nobody knows what long-term effects are for getting the vaccine. You can talk to a million medical professionals and they'll tell you not to worry about it, and they're smarter than I am. But also, I mean, you've seen recently articles coming up about concerns about long-term medical effects or health effects for COVID. If everybody kind of just focuses on not going to die. Well, that's not the only thing. I mean, there's long COVID effect. People are, still having physical problems months and months, and some people years later. And we have no idea what's going to happen 10 years down the road if you had COVID 10 years ago. There's an article that just came out. They're concerned dementia rates are going up, may go up, and it may give people who are prone to dementia accelerate that process. I mean, there's so many unknowns. It just seems odd to me that we're willing to risk our children's health who can't get vaccinated under the age of 12 right now, just because of all the various, what in my opinion are lame excuses for not doing it. I guess I just don't understand why someone would risk a 10-year-old's health, long-term health prospects because of X, Y, and Z. This is why I don't want to get vaccinated, or this is why we don't want to mandate vaccines for public sector workers or for any worker that deals with the public.
Yeah, so I think that there's provincial politics have a lot to do with this. The public agrees with you, Don. I agree with you. The entire population, absent those who cannot be vaccinated, should be vaccinated. And I think the vast majority of Canadians are on board with that. Public polling is 70-80% in favor of vaccination. You don't see consensus like that in this country very often. We all agree, but we don't all agree. There is a fraction of the population who don't, right? But there is enough of a consensus that the provincial government should be leading the way on this stuff. We shouldn't have waited until September 1st to hear about a vaccination passport. That is something that would have been great to have in place before the start of school, for example. we shouldn't have to have local organizations. With all due respect to these local organizations, they're often not equipped to make decisions of this level of gravity. You know, the provincial government, the Ministry of Education has access to advisors and access to people who understand the science, that you know, you just cannot expect a local elected part-time school board to have access to that kind of stuff. These decisions should be coming from the province, and they should be, you know, like I said, there is a huge consensus on this issue in Ontario, in Canada, but you know where there's not a huge consensus is within the PC party. And I think this is a problem and a reason why we're seeing these kind of half measures, and you're seeing local organizations left to their own devices. It's very difficult and uncomfortable for the premier to make these calls, because he's had to throw people out of his caucus for not being vaccinated. There is a decently sized anti-vax contingent in the PC party of Ontario. So it's very difficult, I think, for the premier to be aggressive on this. And I don't think that's an excuse at all, but I think that's a reality. And so you're now asking people who frankly should never, it's just like the city of Windsor should not be in a position to decide whether or not fluoride can go in the water. Because as we've seen, the city of Windsor, their council is not equipped to make that decision. They just flat out are not equipped to be able to make that decision, with all due respect to all the people on council, many of whom are great, smart people. They're just not equipped to be able to make a good decision. And I think that when you're talking about public health decisions should flow from senior government, and you should leave as little as possible to the local authorities.
And the fluoride debates coming back to Windsor, I saw in a couple weeks. We're supposed to be.
Please tell me it's not.
It is.
Seriously.
Yeah,
it is. We're on target to have reintroduced in November, and the group who opposes fluoride is going to be launching a embargoed campaign that I came across. So I guess they failed with the embargo because we're talking about it. So I do agree with you on that 100%, Doug. I mean, there are certain decisions that need to be left out of the hands of, you know, where they're not capable of doing it. And I think it goes a lot back to what you were saying at the beginning there with the story of, or not the story, it wasn't an allegory, it's a hypothetical about a business with 4 employees and what would be done. And I think you've got your own business. I used to have my business, and like we all work in private business, and what are the very real implications? All that I keep saying is, I'm glad I don't have my business anymore. I wouldn't want to be dealing with this kind of stuff right now. There's no doubt about that. I don't know. I still kind of feel though it's a cop out from the Kind board to motion for a mandatory vaccination. Just motion that you yourselves are for it. Don't motion calling for it. You know, it's a little bit of nuance that still allows a bit of that politics there. But I do agree with you, Doug, as you said. I mean, it's a huge step forward, and you can't say they're not fully committed to at least this idea, right? They came out and said it.
You can't expect. I mean, the Catholic Board of Windsor Essex is a big organization with a lot of resources, but those resources are to be deployed for the education of students. They're not to be deployed to get into legal fights. They're not, they are far less equipped than the provincial government to deal with this issue effectively. And so probably from a risk management point of view, doing a motion calling for the province to do the right thing is the appropriate measure for them to take.
Well, yeah, because they're an organization that deals with local issues, just like city councils and stuff. This isn't a local issue. This is a global issue if you want to go that far, but certainly a Canadian and Ontario issue. So yeah, it should be top down. I'm a big fan of small government, but in some circumstances, you actually need to have smart people running the show at the top. So, and this is one of them.
Well, let's shift our focus a little bit to the public board then. They've released the plan for reopening of the public board, and for extracurriculars, they recommend they don't recommend they're going to be going forward with in-person extracurricular group gathering events, so club sports teams and bands, cautiously and gradually reintroduced. Cohorts may interact outdoors with physical distancing encouraged and indoors with masking and appropriate physical distancing. For band, there must be a minimum distance of 2 meters between students playing wind instruments. What's up, fellow trumpet players? Don smiling as a bass player. You just stand at the back, pluck the bass. You can get your music out, turn up the volume as you need be.
Look blow hard. Just keep the noise down up there, would you?
We've got a show coming up.
Blatant public personal promotion.
I'm doing it. But I was wondering, do I have to put a mask on the end of my trumpet?
You should, yeah.
Because it seems like the best thing to
just
do.
Use a mute like Miles Davis did all the time.
I got my Harmon mute. It just
there you go.
Now, moving forward with inter-school sport activities, they're going to be following health and physical education requirements. High and low contact activities will be permitted outdoors without masking. High and low contact activities will be permitted indoors with masking encouraged. Now, looking at vaccinations, the public board is encouraging everyone who's eligible to get vaccinated from 12 and up. And then the key statement here is the Ontario Ministry of Education intends to release information in the near future regarding a vaccination disclosure policy for all publicly funded school board employees and rapid antigen testing for staff who have not been immunized for COVID-19. So clearly there, the choice will be up to the educator. What do you want to do? Undergo this testing on a regular basis, one would presume, or would you just want to do the vaccine thing? Now, we talked about this a bit in our show chats before. I guess the cost of this testing comes into play. Specifically, I guess, I've been seeing this going around social media. Private schools are eligible for free rapid testings right now from the provincial government because they are businesses obviously they're private businesses. So they're eligible for free rapid testing. Public schools are not. So I do now wonder, do you think, is it going to be provided just for teachers to be undergoing this? Like, who's going to be bearing the cost? I think we all know the answer. The taxpayer is going to be bearing the cost at the end of the day here. But, it is a point that I wanted to make draw a distinction to. Doug, why don't we start with you and work our way down?
Sure. So, I guess
work your way down. What the hell does that mean?
on the screen, you're at the bottom.
Let's talk to Doug first and get to the moron later on.
You just called me a blowhard.
Well, fair enough. Sorry, Doug. Go ahead.
That's quite all right, you guys. I don't really know how I can recover from that, but I'll do my best. So, the thing that I'd like to understand is a little bit more of the science or the medicine around the rapid testing. What kind of risk does it create when you're testing somebody twice a week? And so you've got a symptom check at the door and you've got rapid testing happening twice a week. I would like to understand how effective that is in keeping individuals with COVID out of the building. Like, I've heard about the regime, and it seems pretty common. You're going to have to test twice a week if you're not vaccinated, but I don't know the science of it. And I would really like to understand, because I think it would really help inform this debate. If that gives you 80% efficacy, if a regime like that gives you 80% efficacy and you're massively reducing the risk by requiring people who aren't vaccinated to test twice a week and do a symptom check, then that's great. If it is 10% efficacy, and I'm just making these numbers up, I have no idea, then it's just a dog and pony show. You're just punishing people for not being vaccinated. So which is it, and how? I don't know, and I don't think anyone on this panel knows, and correct me if one of you guys has a degree in epidemiology, but I just don't know how effective it is. And I think it would really help inform the debate and how hard of a line we should be taking on vaccination to understand how effective the alternative is.
Well,
And even sorry, John, make your joke. Go ahead.
no, it's fine. Just go.
I was going to make a correspondence school joke, but I didn't. So, actually, to Doug's point, so even if it is 80%, let's say it is 80%, we're just making numbers up because none of us really know. Is that enough? I mean, the reality is, if you test positive for COVID, it doesn't mean you got it 10 seconds ago. It doesn't mean you got it in your car on the drive to school. So if you get tested on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I mean, you could have had it Monday from the weekend, or you could have had it, you could have picked it up Wednesday and they're not testing you for another day, which means you can now spread it to my grandkids or people's kids, and it goes around. It's nothing. And even the vaccine, look, we know the vaccine's not 100% effective, but it's your best defense against spreading COVID. So again, I mean, to me, I don't care what board it is. I'm going to have the same points on both sides. It's just, I truly believe that vaccination should be mandatory for people working in the schools, and then especially if you're working for the government on any level, you should just have to be vaccinated if you're interacting with people.
Yeah, I'm with Don on that one. If there's accommodations that can be provided, shift someone to just doing virtual learning. Always try to make sure that you don't just, lay someone off.
Yeah.
Because they don't want it. But I do agree there has to be the trade-off here. We live in a society, and you're talking right now about kids who overwhelmingly can't get vaccinated. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what shifts the conversation a little bit here, is like, this is a pretty scary science experiment that's going to be happening, where you're sending kids into environments where they have no protections other than the ones that are put up around them. And there's debates to still be had about ventilation. I can see right now on the Twitter thread that that's actually coming up at the public school board meeting right now. And there's debates about windows being open, about outdoor classes. We've talked about that. But these kids can't get vaccinated if they're under the age of 12 right now. And as you said, Don, we don't know what the long-term effects are, but it seems really counterproductive, the same as it did in long-term care facilities and in hospitals. How are you letting people interact with people who are compromised in one form or another, or vulnerable to this virus, without being protected in any way, shape, or form? And that's where it diverges from, put a mask on or something, to, but we don't know the long-term effects. And, it's a tough one.
Yeah. And when it comes to extracurricular activities, maybe you guys can answer this for me. Is there archery clubs by any chance in any of these schools? Because I got a great plan for vaccinations if there are.
We're going to do a William Tell.
I'm pretty sure there's fencing, Don, so we could work
fencing.
It out.
There we go. So we take all the unvaccinated people, we put them on the football field, fenced in so they can't get out, and then just let the archery guys or the fencers go dip it in the vaccine. If it gets, it's fun for everybody.
Sounds extremely precise. Why don't we mix some ivermectin in there, Don, and we'll be all set. Look,
never mind.
I think that if it wasn't for the fact that this is people's lives and people's health that we're talking about, it would be really interesting discussion about the line between individual rights and collective rights, because I think that is the kind of the area that's being explored here. And if people's lives weren't on the line, it would be really interesting. I'm sympathetic to the folks who have to make decisions about these things, because there is, this is a no-win situation for any decision maker. You're going to piss people off, or you're going to make a mistake. So you got to think that people are using the tools that they have with the best of intentions to make good decisions. I go back to my comments about the provincial government. I think the province could have made it a lot easier on all these individual organizations by moving faster and being clearer about what was going to happen and what needed to happen. People are finding out today that there's going to be a vaccine passport that is required to access non-essential activities in 22 days. It's not enough time to be vaccinated. There's not even enough time to get fully vaccinated. Like, you cannot tell me, I don't think there is any argument you can make that is not a policy failure. When you are telling people that they have to do something and that is going to impact their lives, and you're not actually giving them enough time to do it before it comes down. I had no argument with the timeline. September 22nd is probably too late rather than too early. But informing the public, we're way late on informing the public. I think that this is a tough situation, and I would really like to have a better understanding of the medicine and the science behind some of these decisions. The problem is that I think even the medicine and the science, that conversation has become so politicized that it is, I think, becoming very difficult for a layperson to understand what's what. And I certainly think that the debate is not as illuminating as it should be. We shouldn't be here pulling numbers out of our ass to talk about how effective, masking, symptom checks, and frequent testing. We shouldn't be pulling that out of our ass to know how effective that can be. We should have a good sense of it, but we don't. And I don't think it's because the three of us are dullards. I think it's because it's extremely difficult to tease out accurate information in the media and political environment that we're in right now.
Yeah, and we've been kind of maybe a little bit critical of local government and local school boards, but we all know politicians have very just different levels of government. Just because you're elected provincially or federally doesn't mean you're any smarter than the local city councilor. The reality is this should come down to Health Canada. And, I know they're a government organization, but in theory, they are apolitical. And if they should solely and in absolute have discretion on what the decisions should be made. And the politicians from prime minister down to Joe Blow councilor down at, City Hall, they should really have no say in any of this.
Man, who would have thought Don Merrifield fighting for a more centralized Canada? Never thought I'd see the day.
Health Canada. After that, just don't tax me anymore.
Don
That's what you're talking about. You're consolidating power in cabinet, man. Come on.
No, he wants unelected bureaucrats to make these decisions.
100%.
They're going to tear up your libertarian card, Don.
That's all right. I'll introduce them to my archery club friends.
We'll show them your socialism card.
That's right. Yeah, go to the website.
Let's keep it there. We will we'll touch base on this one again, I'm sure, next week after the public board releases finishes up this meeting and we see what comes from it. But we will round out the show tonight talking about Transit Windsor. Transit Windsor buses bringing COVID-19 vaccinations to the community. The Windsor Essex County Health Unit, Transit Windsor, have teamed. They're launching this pilot project on a bus, bringing COVID vaccines to high priority neighborhoods at the outset here. Nicole Dupuis, CEO of the Health Unit, hopes that this pilot project will be expanded and continued for the long term with additional routes and more consistent scheduling added. That was interesting hearing that right off the bat. She's hoping that this will continue onward. The Health Unit and Transit Windsor were pretty clear. The pilot's objective is part of a broader effort to increase local vaccination rates. They've stalled over the past 2 months. As of September 1st, the percentage of eligible Windsor and Essex County residents aged 12 and up that are vaccinated is 81% with one dose and 74% at both doses. Now, at the provincial level, those numbers are with one dose 83% and with both doses at 76%. So we're lagging that provincial average by 2 percentage points in each category. Now, our rate of people testing positive for COVID has been climbing as well recently, with our last week's 7-day positivity rate of 5.1%, which was the highest in the province. I said that we're consistently number 3. In some categories, we're also number 1. Not the best thing there. Now, what stood out to me, I said this just in the middle there, we've got the CEO of the Health Unit hoping that this pilot will be extended. Obviously, it would be extended presumably until we get our vaccination rates. I don't think we're looking to meet the provincial average. I think we're looking to surpass them. You look at other health units throughout the province, and they have blown past us. There are some that are up into the 90% in both categories, I believe. But every community is a bit different. I like this program. It's a lot better than vaccines in a tunnel. It's practical. It makes sense. The politics here, I presume, doesn't really exist. There was a need. It looks like it was met. I don't see any reason for this thing to get derailed whatsoever, or quite frankly, much criticism about it. Am I nuts here for thinking that, Doug?
No, I think you're right on. I hope that they are going to find a way to paint a line somewhere in the bus, though, so that we can get that call back to the dank dumpster doses in the tunnel. That would be really nice. I know I miss those days. Yeah, I think this is a good plan. The people who are unvaccinated fall into three categories, right? There are the people who have extreme difficulty in finding the time or making the time or figuring out the logistics. You probably lump in with those people who are simply tuned out, lazy, clueless, just haven't gotten around to it. No particular objection. If you show up at their door and explain it to them, they probably get the jab right there. That's one group. Then there's the hesitant folks, right, who would like to not do it if they can avoid it, and maybe amenable to increasing pressure, like vaccine passports for doing non-essential things, all the fun things in life. And then you have the hardcore refusers, right? And I think the question is, in Ontario, how many people are really hardcore refusers? Out of that 26% of Windsorites who don't have both doses, or probably more fairly, that 19% of Windsorites who don't have any vaccination at all, out of that 19%, how many are the hardcore refusers who are infuriated and inflamed by the very prospect of a vaccination? And if programs like this one can help knock down those numbers and get some of the folks who just maybe are too lazy or don't have the time, or whatever the reason might be, this is a great program to do that. Folks who may have a language barrier, folks who may any host of reasons why someone would not be opposed or even hesitant, but just haven't been able to get it done. This program can take care of that. I think that the hesitancy will be addressed by some other things. And if we're left with, let's say, 3% of the population who are the hardcore refusers, that's a manageable number. We can work with that. We can work with a 90 to 95% vaccination rate, at least to the best of my understanding of things that I don't understand. But if that hardcore resistance group is 15%, are we snookered? Like, I think that's a much bigger problem, right?
You don't want to be held hostage here, right? And I think that's the biggest problem. You look to Toronto, and that vocal minority there, it comes down to what you were saying, Doug, is just, if you can get that gap smaller and smaller, the people that are louder and louder they're really going to look like an outsized minority, an out-voiced minority. And it would be a lot easier, I think, for public sentiment to start turning on that when people start to realize, wait a second here, we really don't need any restrictions anymore whatsoever if we can, just convince these final 3% to get on with life. And that's what it's really going to take here. Because, I mean, even under the reopening that we're at right now at stage 3, there still are a lot of restrictions that apply. And now we're seeing more restrictions coming into play to get to a point where we can lessen restrictions, but we're still up against that, that race with new variants that we don't want to see anything else take hold. So it's a constant uphill battle. I've been vamping over Don's space right now, I realize, though, so I'll let you come in.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much I can really add. I kind of agree with everything Doug said. I've heard, I watch way too much American television, but I have heard stories, especially down south, that there's a certain percentage, which isn't, marginal, of especially elderly people and maybe lower income people who just can't get to the vaccination centers. So they have put out like these, rapid vaccination groups that go to neighborhoods and just literally knock on doors. So, any way we can make it easier for anyone who wants the vaccine to get it, I'm certainly not going to be opposed to it. Like you guys said, there's probably going to be that 3 to 7% of people who just aren't going to get it no matter what. And, unless we're going the island of Dr. Moreau, where we're going to start hunting humans with my Archer idea, we're just going to have to deal with the fact that they're just not going to get it and, let it go where it go. And, and again, certainly I could be completely mistaken, but kind of when this thing all started, they were talking, if we can get 80+% people vaccinated in the viral world, and this is all for people 100 times smarter than I am, eventually, COVID will disappear, just because there's not enough of the unvaccinated population to keep, pushing this along, unless this becomes, some kind of super virus that we've never seen before. So, like Doug was saying, if we can get to the 90s, I think we'll be okay. But for love of God, don't base anything you do off of what I think, except for the archery idea. That's fantastic.
Or if you're a Ward 3 voter in Essex.
That's right. I'm gonna have to change my signs to purple, though. It's the only way I'm gonna get voted out there.
Don, do you ever think about maybe trying a stunt out at Snake River Canyon? That might help your name recognition and boost your chances. I think the folks in Essex, they like a daredevil.
I could do it on Snake Lane in LaSalle. I could just
yeah, or River Canard.
River Canard.
You could jump River Canard on your bike, man. I could see that.
100%. Little rocket going on there. John, when you Google this and watch the video, you're gonna find this hilarious.
I've caught up. I realized the generational divide. I'm more of a Super Dave guy. For me, it was Bob Einstein.
No.
It was the mockery, the parody.
It was the mockery for me. Yeah, 100%. Or you might as well just go with the Fonzie version from Happy Days when he
jumped the shark.
When he jumped the shark, but he also tried a few motorcycle stunts that didn't quite pan out.
See, I know a couple references. Just
okay, that's good.
Let's move on though to our favorite segment of the show for your consideration. Doug pulled the short straw. I had one. I was just going to talk about mandatory vaccines, but we have said all of that ad nauseum now. So Doug, we'll sit back. I'll set the stage. We're ready for you.
Okay. Tomorrow, the Windsor Law Center for Cities is hosting a debate, Windsor-Tecumseh and Windsor West Candidates Forum, talking about urban issues. I'm bringing that to everyone's attention who listens to this show, because either you listen to this show for our perspective on municipal issues, or you really, really like Don's jokes. So I'm assuming that it's more the former than the latter, in which case you probably are interested in how the federal candidates and the federal party platforms align with visions around municipal governance and cities. So you can register for these free online Zoom events moderated by friend of the show, Rich Garten, nicest guy in broadcasting in Windsor. And you can register at windsorlawcities.ca. Click on the events link, and it will be all there for you. And we are going to do our very best to broadcast these on our podcast feed. As a podcast, we are still working that out, but hopefully we'll be able to do that. So register, attend, participate, and if not, you just got to hope that we come through. For your consideration.
For your consideration. Do it yourself. Don't have faith in us. We will try our best. We are, and this has been Rose City Politics for September the 1st. Our regular panel tonight included myself, John Lidke. We had Don Merrifield Jr. and Doug Sartori as well. If you made it all the way through and you're a Patreon subscriber, thank you. You make this possible. If not, you're a freeloader. Get over to patreon.com/Rose City Politics. Become a supporter. You know you want to. If you're the kind of person who's listening to this show on a weekly basis, but freeloading along, thinking that you can just skate by without having to, give us a couple bucks, we'll get you. We're going to come door to door and we're going to give you a vaccine. Take some money.
I'm no marketing expert, but I don't think insulting our listeners and threatening them and using grandma's guilt to get them to pay us is probably the best policy. If you could be so kind and help us fund this show, it's not free. We appreciate any support you can, but if you can't give, we encourage you to keep listening.
I have been trying to be nice for the better part of a year and a half. It's time to try new strategies. No, thank you so much. We do love all of you so much. Check us out in BizX magazine as well. We've got a new issue. We're on social media where you get your podcasts. Like, share, and subscribe. And I do say this one nice every single time. We're able to broadcast live on tape throughout this entire pandemic, thanks to the kind support of LiUNA 625, Building Better Communities. We will be back next week diving into the most important local news that there is of the week. So we'll see you next week. All the best.